Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about MSU's complete annihilation of the Washington Huskies, 88-54 at the Breslin Center in front of the Izzone Alumni. Scariest part of this game might have been the fact that it wasn't very indicative of how much of a beatdown this game was, because the game was 42-13 at the break, as Washington was just completely flummoxed in offense, shooting 5 for 29 for the first half, 0 for 7 from 3. And there wasn't much to criticize about Michigan State's performance in this game because they were great defensively. They ran well. They got to the line a decent amount, were efficient when they got there. They shot 35% from three, 62.5% from two, out rebounded the Huskies by 10, had 10 steals, scored 28 fast break points to Washington's two. They now moved to 13-2 overall, 4-0 in the Big Ten. I guess all I can say, Rod, is welcome to Big Ten, Washington. That was, I think, the
Well,
first time I still saw a post somewhere that was the first time Washington's seen a crowd more than 9,000. And
yeah,
that was quite a crowd to get
it's
welcomed
not,
in.
I mean, it's not, we were talking about this just before we started recording. You would never, at least if you're in your right mind, predict a 30-point plus margin in a
Right.
conference game. But the fact that Michigan State won this easily is not surprising. We talked about in our preview that this is for that team, other than two guys, and their coach. They've never been in that kind of environment, or very, very rarely. I mean, if some of those guys who were on the, well, I'm struggling to think now who was actually on their team last year. Not, I don't, off the top of my
Oh,
head, I'm not
I
sure if
don't,
they have any
I
returnees
can't
that are
remember. Yeah.
in their rotation. Um, but they just, they don't have experience in environments like that. And another note I saw today, which again I can't verify, but anecdotally seems like it might be right. Uh, when MSU plays in front of the alumni zone, they tend to outperform.
Yeah.
They tend to
If they
cover
beat the
the
line,
spread.
yeah, cover the
Yep.
spread +9 or
Yeah.
something on the spread,
Yeah.
usually on average. Yeah.
And boy, they did. I mean, the line was like I saw 13 and a half and 14 near game
Doesn't
time, and
matter.
people were questioning, like, is that too high?
Yeah.
I really didn't think so. I thought the only way Michigan State wouldn't cover that line is if it would take a combination of Washington playing more or less about as well as they did this weekend at home, where they beat Maryland and pushed Illinois,
Right.
and Michigan State playing well below their normal seasonal level. Not one, both
Yeah.
is what it was going to take, in my opinion. And you saw tonight, Michigan State more or less played at their normal levels, and Washington, because of that, in part because of Michigan State playing that way, Washington was not within light years of the way that they played at home. And it's just, look, and this is what we were getting at, I think, is that you go on the road. This is their first trip, at least for a true road game, I believe, out of the Pacific time zone this
Yes.
year. So you've got travel. They said on the broadcast they came in 2 days ago. They came in on Tuesday.
Hmm.
Smart move if your schedule allowed it, to try to acclimate to the time shift and all of that. And they're apparently going to stay. We touched on this, I think, the other day about the Michigan State swing
Yeah.
being the only one that is maybe akin to Los Angeles. And it sounds like they're kind of approaching it that way, that they're going to stay in their hotel in East Lansing tomorrow, I think they said, and then they play in Ann Arbor, I believe, on Sunday.
Yes.
So I don't know what they're doing Saturday night. They probably go down to a hotel in Ann Arbor, but at least it's
Yeah.
minimal disruption. But just the fact that you're going that far away from home, okay, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, and maybe this is bigger than even we originally talked about, because most of our conversations have been about the effects of travel. We haven't
Uh-huh.
talked a lot about, well, how different is it going to be for teams like that actually playing in full arenas where the crowds are really aggressive? And they found out tonight what that looks like, and it doesn't look very good. Um, and we've seen it. We saw it UCLA going to Nebraska and losing in that
Hmm.
scenario. Now, Oregon managed to pull one out frankly pull it out of their ass. At Ohio State, they
Yeah.
won it by a point or by 3 or 2, I think, 2 points. They got a late free throw. They won it by 2, but Ohio State is one of the worst home environments in the league.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not a. But the point is, it's not a disaster. If you put Ohio State or Michigan in the Pac-12, they'd be right up near the. Arizona would be at the top, and then they'd probably factor in somewhere just after that. In the Big Ten, they're afterthoughts. They
Yeah.
don't. They don't compare to Michigan State, to Illinois. Certainly not to Purdue. I would say not to Indiana. You could argue not to Wisconsin. Maryland, when Maryland is good, has a great environment. I mean, in Nebraska,
Even Rutgers.
yeah. Well, when Rutgers is competitive, now the way some of these teams are going, Rutgers is a good example. I'm not sure how raucous the environment's going to be, but you get the point. They found out tonight. Oh, this is a different thing. And I think that some of it, look, Michigan State was great defensively and lights out, something beyond great in the first half. But there was also some of Washington just missing shots that, as much as anything else, you have to say, well, they didn't look comfortable. And I think that the environment had something to do with that. That would be my guess. But yeah, just a really sound. The other thing I'm really pleased about, and it's a small thing, but it's worth mentioning. You're up 29 at the half. When we've seen this, if we've seen it once, we've seen it 1,000 times.
I know you're going, yeah.
Yeah, that you would expect slippage, lack of focus, people getting lackadaisical in the second half. Instead, Michigan State wins it by 34. They pushed it out to, I believe the high was 41 or 42 in terms of the margin.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as dominant as the first half, but it was they still won the second half. That's impressive because that tells me that there's a focus level and a desire on the part of this team that can help put them in a spot where we all want to see them, which is a legitimate Big Ten contender. Those are the things like, okay, we can all acknowledge, and I've been saying this. I got a little pushback on the Spartan Mag board about this the other day after last weekend, but I've been very much of the belief that Washington is a bad team. I picked them 17th, only above Minnesota. I might be talked into maybe bumping them up a spot, but I still think they're a bad team, especially offensively.
Yeah.
But this is what good teams do to teams like that. That's not it doesn't count for Michigan State. No, that's what you do. You wreck a bad team.
Yeah.
And that's what Michigan State did. And it also, it's at the margins, but these kinds of wins against high majors, and Washington came into the game inside the top 100 nationally on KenPom. These kinds of wins by these kinds of margins help you.
Right.
They help you. They help you at the margins. So, if you're going to win a game, that's again why I think the second half was cool to see, because they didn't let it become a 16-point win. They kept the gas pedal down. And
I think that's a reflection in many ways of Jeremy Fears. I think he just continues to push and force the issue, and there's never a letdown in intensity, and certainly at the pace. And so that was, and I feel like that's something when you play a little bit slower that can kind of happen to you. You get sort of late shot clock. And anyway, that just didn't happen in the second half, which helped. I think that helped. And it was impressive. And I think the thing we were talking about too before we came in there briefly is this is something that the team has not done in the last few years. In fact, I would say most Michigan State teams don't really completely blow the doors off the teams as frequently as they are right now. I mean, I hate to imagine them peaking right now. There's plenty of parts of their game that I don't think is peaking, and so I'm not too concerned about that. But they've handled both their home games have been just complete destructions of the other teams, both Nebraska and now Washington. Washington, they're not great, But Nebraska, pretty good, at
It's
least decent
competitive,
team,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I mean they're a team that's got some parts, and to just wreck these teams it's impressive.
Yeah, 2 home games in the league so far. They're winning by an average of 35 points, 36-point win, a 34-point win. I'm I'm sure it's happened, but I can't remember a season easily coming to mind where they had multiple games like this in the league. It's rare. We spend all our time talking about how important free throws are, right?
Right.
Because a lot of Big Ten games are going to be played in a tight window. And boy, so far you can't tell by Michigan State because you add to that the 2 road games. They beat Minnesota by 18, which for a road win, that's a significant margin, even against a bad opponent. You did a job.
Yeah.
And they beat Ohio State by 7. So not a blowout, but 3 possessions. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I do think that game was there to win by double digits.
Yeah.
If they hadn't had that loss in focus for that stretch in the second half, I think they win that one by double digits too. They were close
Mm-hmm.
as it was. So, yeah. Now, in fairness to them, or in fairness to the situation, so we don't go overboard. Michigan State has had an extremely friendly start to their Big Ten schedule. There's no two ways about it.
Scheduling wise, the team,
Yeah,
yeah, right. I
who
agree.
they've played.
Mm-hmm.
They've played, the other unbeaten is Michigan, right? So Michigan has faced Wisconsin and UCLA on the road. Those are 2 really good road wins.
Yes.
Really good. And they played Iowa and I'm drawing a blank who their other home game
I don't think they've had
was
another home game
against. Yeah, they're four. They're
because they're at
four.
you at well
They're
they
four and
won
zero.
at USC as well. They've
Oh,
had
you're
3 road
right. I'm
games.
sorry. So 3
Yeah.
road wins. 3 road wins.
Yeah, that's very
And
impressive. 1-3.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but USC's a bad team.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Sure.
I'd put in the category of going on the road against Minnesota and winning.
Sure.
But the other 2 are really impressive. Okay, so you give them some credit. Illinois has already done their West Coast swing, and they won both of them. They
Mm-hmm.
got by this Washington team, and then they just ran a train on Oregon. And they also have I'm drawing a blank on who they beat at home. Their one loss came on the road at Northwestern, which is that'll happen. That's not a terrible loss. At least I don't think so. Then these are the better teams in the league. Michigan State, the best opponent they've played probably was at Ohio State.
And they're 2-3. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so, you could say, well, friendly schedule, and I don't disagree. And it's going to stay relatively friendly for the next couple weeks, basically until we get to February, and then it turns up a notch. But at the same time, you can only play the teams that are put in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not just, well, we beat that group by 5, we won that one by 8. They're beating the hell out of these teams. They're crushing them. So as a Michigan State fan, I'm very, very happy with what I'm seeing. You talked about, not really being particularly worried about whether they were peaking too early. And I completely agree with they're not peaking. There's a lot more they can do well. I mean, 3-point shooting is an obvious thing that could stand some improvement. I think turnovers, which had been heading in the wrong direction for a while, was much better tonight, but they did have 8 of them in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that can be tightened up. There's certain, and then you get down to individuals, and we can roll through several individuals where I think we could say, oh, that guy's got a lot more potential to give. So I'm with you. I'm not worried about that at all, despite the fact that they're rolling up these huge margins. The biggest thing to me is going to be, I really am locked into paying attention to what the 4 West Coast schools do on these Eastern trips.
Right. Yeah.
And so far, give Oregon credit for pulling one out today. That's one positive. But the other 2 results, UCLA losing and then tonight losing, are more along the lines of what I kind of expect may happen. And it also it depends on, obviously, this almost go without saying, but a better team you would expect to fare better, right?
Yeah.
So UCLA, I've been on the UCLA bandwagon all year as a legitimate contender, and I still like that team when they play the way that they're capable of playing, meaning with the effort and grit. They kind of remind me a little bit of Michigan State in some ways, but they were just awful at home against Michigan. They were
Yeah.
terrible. Other than like a 15-minute stretch in the middle of the game, they were horrendous. And they thoroughly deserved to get whipped in that one, and they did. So I don't know how good they are. We'll see what they're like as they keep having to head east. Oregon, again, a team I was high on coming into the season. Not sure, and they've got some impressive wins. I think they've got 4 wins against, and maybe tonight is 5 against top 35 Ken Palm teams
Yeah. They're
already.
good outside the Big Ten.
But that complete ass whipping they took at home against Illinois and losing at home to UCLA, they've already got 2 home losses. So I'm not sure how good Oregon is. USC and Washington are going to have a lot of nights like the one you just saw.
Yeah.
Now, not necessarily by those margins, but my expectation is there are going to be a lot of very unpleasant nights on the road for those 2 teams. But we'll see. We'll have a lot of data once we get through this season, and it'll be, as I've pointed out, we've talked about here before. I'd be very interested to see if any of these guys say something about it. Mick Cronin definitely will. He was the guy we identified in an earlier episode. And if you haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and watch his post-game press conference after the Michigan loss. You will have never seen anybody eviscerate their own team the way he did. So if you had any doubts that he would be the guy to start squawking about the travel, put him to rest. I'd be shocked if he doesn't have something to say. If not during the season, then in the off season.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's after Maryland game, the next game.
Right. It could be this weekend. It could be tomorrow night. Because I don't know what the hell. I'd have to look at the other teams to see if they're facing something similar. But the schedule maker, my God, they go to Nebraska last weekend on Saturday, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Turn around, they're at home on Tuesday. Then they go back to Maryland. They fly back across the country on Friday. That's insane.
But it's the only way. I mean, it's not like there's a close place because they played all the West Coast teams already. They're already out of the way for the most part. I mean, they've got a couple of home and aways and stuff.
They could play at USC.
But those guys got to play East Coast too. It
do.
Looks like Oregon and Washington both do the Michigan State trip together. But outside of that, it's...
But more than that, I'm just talking about that the away home away nature of it.
Yeah, it's tougher for them.
But I also think you should be able, I would hope, to try and bracket these things in twos. We got an even number of teams in the league, right? So theoretically, at least, I would think it should be possible to do 2 home games this week, 2 road games next week.
Yeah. I mean, the other teams going west, they play 2 road games at once, right? So they just get their trip out of the way.
By the way, you also, even if you were going to keep this thing as it is, you could have maybe made that Friday night game, in Iowa City or Minneapolis. I'm not sure who they play, who they don't play, but Maryland is the worst possible trip you could take, other than maybe Rutgers. They might be equivalent. You know what I mean? Like that just, you could have done something, anything. Christ, the Michigan schools, that's 2 hours less on an airplane.
Yeah.
It's just, really wild to me. But
let's talk about the game a little bit. Let's talk about it. So I think what the biggest story to me, especially really since the Big Ten season began, and maybe probably a few games before that, is Jaden Akins. And we don't really talk about him much.
You're right.
Which is
not as much as we should.
Not as much as we should. but I think that's a testament to sort of who he has become. It was a guy that we both questioned coming into the season whether he was going to be the guy, the guy who's going, and he's
Yep.
not going out there flashy, scoring 30 point. I mean, he dropped 20 today, and I say quiet 20, and it sort of was. I mean, he had eight. He was 8 for 13, super efficient from the field. 3 point shot not quite dialed in yet. 2 for 6. I mean, not terrible, but okay. Uh, Defensively, fantastic. He had at least that one steal and breakaway dunk, but he has been the senior leader you expect for him to
Yeah.
be, and he has really embraced that role. But he's not forcing, and I think that was the thing. I think we both were concerned about coming the season is that he was going to be a guy who was going to be feeling like he had to go get his, or that he was going to be relied upon to get 20 a game, and so then he kind of forced the issue, which is where there are plenty of times last year or two we've seen it where he just would try to get in, find a spot and get kind of take an awkward jump shot, and just not the case now. It's been very encouraging to see.
I agree with all of that, and we don't talk about him enough. You're right. He found, I think, really basically since Maui.
Yeah.
So I would even take it back maybe slightly before, and I don't recall him putting up like monster games in Maui, but I think ever since then, this whole team, Andy Katz mentioned it tonight. I saw a little bit of the post game, and he was talking about how he was there, and he said sometimes you're covering a game and you don't know how big it is until it's a retrospective thing,
Yeah.
But he was at that game where they played North Carolina. Wasn't a championship game, consolation bracket, and the fact that they won, it's all taken off from there. And I think that's true, but I also think it's true about some individuals. And I would say Jaden is one of those guys because even at the start of this season, there was some of what we have come to expect in previous years from him in terms of inconsistency, right? That seems to be ironed out now. That doesn't mean he's going to go and drop 20 every night. We know that. But I think you're 100% right about the way he's approaching games, which is so important. He's not getting outside of himself.
No.
There's an occasional three that he might pull here or there that just doesn't feel right to me rhythmically as I'm watching it happen, but that's minor. And there's room to disagree with me. That's just me. But for the most part, the stuff that you worried about was, all right, is he going to force a lot of um, angled pick and roll stuff, or
Yeah.
where he's just going to try to break somebody down to try to get into a mid range jumper the way Tyson Walker would? And he's not forcing that stuff. When that stuff happens, it's happening in the flow of the offense. He's getting a lot done as a transition player, which I think is really important. And he's playing downhill a lot. I mean, how many buckets? He was 6 for 7 from two tonight, which
Yeah.
is outstanding. Why was he that good? Because he was at the rim all night.
Yeah.
I mean, when Jaden Akins is doing that, when he's getting to the rim, look out because he's such a good athlete. He's strong enough. I've always felt from the moment he got here that he could be a guy who would be an upper tier guard finisher for Michigan State, the way that guys like Kalen Lucas and Keith Appling were. And a night like tonight, you see it. So yeah, I'm with you. That's one thing that I think is worth talking about, that he is putting together the kind of senior season you hope for. And it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. Would it be shocking to see Jaden Akins, just the way he's playing right now, would it be shocking to see him have the kind of end to his senior year that a guy like Travis Trice had? I don't think so. And the
No.
reason I bring that up is, they've had different careers and they're different players in a lot of ways. But
Right.
one similarity is Travis Trice was also a guy who was kind of a teaser his first 3 years. And with him, a lot of it had to do with bad injury luck. Like he was
Hmm.
constantly hurt over the offseason, so he could never get his body built up, which meant he struggled to convert inside the arc. And then eventually, as he finally had a healthy offseason before his senior year, the way I remember that season is he was good, most of the way, but man, it got toward the end of the regular season and he kicked it into another gear, and that continued right through the NCAA tournament. Um, I wouldn't be shocked to see Jaden the way that Jaden is playing now. I'll admit I've been wrong because my feeling coming into the season was, hey, the best thing for Jaden would be if he just accepts that he's a good player, he's a guy who's got a role in this offense, but he doesn't need to be the alpha. He doesn't need to be the main guy. And
Yeah.
I do think he's kind of playing with that mentality, but in the most positive sense,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
so when you're doing that and you're having the games he's had, and you're playing the way he's playing, um, he's setting himself up. I'll say that. He's putting himself in position that you could start to envision, hey, maybe there's a, last week of February on in kind of finishing kick that he's got in him, where nights like tonight become commonplace,
Yeah.
you
Or
know?
he's hitting two more threes that, that are
Right.
open, right? He's
No,
going four for
that would be
six instead
enough.
of 2 for 6. And then
That
suddenly
would
you're
be
like, yeah.
that would be enough to do it. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not much.
and it's things those are things that he's done in his career. So
Exactly. Yeah. So, it's in him
yeah.
somewhere. The obvious thing to talk about is Jeremy Fears, who
Oh
I
yeah.
mentioned before, really pushing the ball, getting much more comfortable, feels more comfortable shooting ball, hit his first three, and then promptly missed the next three. Uh, but 10 assists, one turnover, not bad. And defensively, and I throw him out there because he's the leader, but he and Akins, Holloman
Yeah.
and Richardson. I mean, those guys, what a nightmare to go up against those four guards. There's just
100%.
no it's not like somebody leaves the court and then you've got to rest and then you throw Carr out there at times too, chasing you around. And I'll
Yep.
even say the bigs, Kohler and Zapala and Cooper, don't make things easy either. I mean, they're with the pick and rolls they defensively they're just really good and just make it they just make it a nightmare to play against them.
Well, let's talk about the defense first. Michigan State's switching right now is operating, in my opinion, at a very high level. And I can say that because what you're not seeing is you're not seeing guys getting taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So you get switched onto somebody. I truly those four guards you mentioned are all just locking down. I mean, Jaden and Jeremy tonight were leading, but all of them are. And so if you're an opposing guard in this league, you're Zoom Diallo tonight, and you're being guarded by Jeremy Fears, and you get switched onto Jace Richardson. That's might as well be Jeremy Fears, because a switch might as well not have happened, because that's how consistent everybody's been. And you're right; those bigs are. I thought the bigs were outstanding tonight defensively
Yeah.
against Osobor. I mean, locked him up, and they didn't have to sell out to do it. I mean, there was you'd see an occasional flash of a double, not as much digging into the post for the perimeter as I kind of expected, but those guys, man. And as you said, they've been pretty good on pick and roll. I mean, there's a little more variability there, but still, all in all, pretty good. Um, couldn't be happier with that. At that end of the floor, Michigan State is they are moving up toward being an elite defense. Robbie Hummel said that at halftime. Absolutely right. That's the path that they are on,
Yeah.
and I think that it is, if they could stay at or near this level, that puts a very, very high floor on what this team can be, in my opinion. If you defend the way they're defending, yeah, you might not win the Big Ten. We'll see. But you're not finishing seventh either, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, just to
Um,
your point, I mean, I look at Torvik before this game, and I'm sure it's changed, but their defense is ranked 25th, offense is ranked 39th. I mean, It's going to
Oh,
just
they're
get,
much better. They're much better.
it'll be better
They're
than that
much better.
now.
No, they're much better than that. On Ken Palm, they're much better than that. They're top 10 defense. I don't know
Okay.
what Torvik is talking about. Yeah, they're an elite defense already. They're all and nights like tonight are going to do nothing to hurt that. Back to fears. Um, I think you made a point earlier that part of the reason you didn't see that second half slippage is because they've got him in there to keep the engine running.
Yep.
And that's absolutely true. Uh, he made numerous, just great reads, great decisions. He was a little more assertive in looking for his own offense tonight, which is a good thing to see because I think he's got more to give. And then you talk about what he does defensively. I mean, this is a kid. He's not getting any national attention, and that's for obvious reasons because he's not putting up big scoring numbers.
Right.
But if you want to talk about a complete point guard, the pure traditional definition of what that kind of player is, it's Jeremy Fears, and he's a freshman. I understand he's not a true freshman, but he's a freshman. How much better is he going to get? I submit a lot better. But he's already very, very good now. He's just been playing great basketball, and tonight was another example. I thought at both ends he was just outstanding.
Yeah, I think why don't we just go into just move through and before talking about any other individuals. I don't think there's anything else to point out particular. I think.
Well, I want to note one thing. I want to
Okay.
note one negative from this game.
Okay.
And I was shocked that we didn't see something done about it from the bench. There was a play.
Oh, you've been talking about Booker's play where
yes, where the ball went off his shin.
Yeah.
And he didn't go hard. Now maybe he thought it went off the Washington player, but even if that was the case, that's
could have
not
blocked
an
him out
excuse.
to let it go out of bounds, roll out of bounds.
He was running half speed. It was a joke.
Yeah.
And I was really shocked that he didn't get pulled from the lineup. Absolutely shocked.
I was too. Yeah. Especially up that many points. Like you think for sure he's going to teaching moment. Yeah.
That just you can't have that. And we've talked about with Booker before, it's not going to be a hockey stick. And we've seen that really the last couple weeks. He had that run of about 5 games where it all looked like it was coming together, and he's kind of been back and forth. I mean, he did some things tonight. He did some positive things.
Yep.
But I did not like that play, and I'm sure that the staff is not going to like that play, and hopefully we're going to see a re-energized Xavier Booker on Sunday in Evanston because that was a joke.
I would say in his defense, just in the performance, that was a bad sequence because then of course they ended up giving up the 3 because he kind of sort of half-hearted effort to get out to cover, which is again is why like for sure he's coming out. But but on offense, he was definitely driving. He was trying to score inside a lot more, and as opposed to just floating around the 3-point line. So that was an improvement over I think over previous performances. But yes, that is a problem.
He had a great cut that ended up in a dunk. I can't remember who hit him with the pass. I think it was Jeremy in the first half. And so he did some good things, but man, cannot have that. And it stands out so much more with this team because, as we've talked about, this team has kind of taken on this more traditional Michigan State toughness, energy, grit kind of feel.
Yeah.
And it's really permeates throughout the roster. I mean, we just don't see moments like that. And so to see it happen was really jarring. So anyway, gotta talk about the good and the bad, right? That was the one really bad thing that I thought leaped out.
That is the one nit to pick, I suppose, for this game.
Yeah.
So let's talk about gutters. It's an important part of your house. Make sure, or your business, if you've got a water, which if state of Michigan, plenty of water. Although right now it's frozen, I hear. You want to make sure that water stays away from your house and has proper gutter water removal. The Brothers Adjusted Gutters, all they do is gutters. And so, as you know, if you need gutter work in the east side or the west side of the state, those are the guys you should contact first. Super friendly, efficient, They'll get things done at great pricing,
Well,
and they'll get up there and do stuff even now. When can't imagine getting up on a ladder personally. I don't like getting ladders to begin with, but especially when it's sub-zero weather. So they'll get up there and do it. They can also put on some heaters on your gutters too. So if you have problems with icicles and stuff, it can melt the snow so it doesn't have the big buildup. They'll keep those gutters flowing freely. They can put leaf guards on. They can repair things. Whatever you need done, they can fix it. So contact the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters today. Make sure you reach them at our support page. You can find ways to do that at tffinots.com/support or the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. You can contact either Kurt or Greg, depending where you are in the state of Michigan, and then get out there and take care of your gutters. And the player that Michigan State needed to keep in the gutter was great Osobor. There are some games where like they didn't get it done. Some games you're like, I'm not sure. This is a no doubt. Michigan State kept great Osobor in the gutter. He was 0 for 8 from the field, 0 for 1 from 3, 6 for 8 from the line. So he got there, which was contributed to all 6 points. 4 rebounds, 2 of them offensive. He had an assist, a turnover, a steal, a block. And as we mentioned before the game, he leads the team in points, uh, rebounds, assists, turnovers. It's like, I think, steals too. So anyway, so he was completely thrown off. I think this is one of those games where Michigan State, their size really bothered him. And I think
yeah,
I think he wasn't able to really use his physical abilities to do anything because he was just harassed enough from the guards and the rotation from the bigs, where you either had the 4 or the 5 guarding him, sometimes the same, just briefly, like you mentioned, it was like not quite a double, but sort of a quick show. Anyway, he was totally removed from the game.
yeah, it was a great performance against him, and he only played 19 minutes. Some of that was caused by foul trouble in the first half that he sat, and then I think some of it was when the game obviously was not becoming competitive.
Yeah, right.
Danny Sprinkle just opted to sit him, which is probably not the worst decision. I mean, only bad things could have happened from there. But I just think Michigan State's length. I mean, they had 6 blocks in this game, but it was way more than that. It was the way that Michigan State's length played and what that did to I think Washington's players, and Osobor was one of them. I think we're just kind of seeing ghosts after a while,
Yeah, you didn't
you
know where it was
know?
coming from. The defense is
Yeah.
like, yeah,
And they did well, but just that they were so long that when he had a shot attempt, even if it wasn't going to get blocked, he was still feeling the effect of that length. And to hold a guy like that without any field goals, that's really really impressive. Now, for the entire season, we haven't had a keep him in the gutter that was as on point as this one.
yeah,
They shut him down.
no question. Not much more to say except he was totally removed from the game. All right, so who cleans the glass best? Brought to you by the people who definitely clean the glass best, the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Friends, if you have your house needs to be power washed, you need your windows cleaned, maybe the inside, maybe the screens, which let's be honest, no one ever cleans the screens, the windowsills, whatever it might be, your blinds, they take care of your blinds as well. Contact the Swedish Squad of Grand Rapids. They can come out and do the work, even this kind of weather. Certainly the interior stuff. They also do some interior painting in the winter. So if you want a room spruced up, 1 or 2 rooms, or maybe your entire house on the inside, they can come in and they can take care of the painting as well. Because again, ladders they're terrible. Just stay off the ladders, really, honestly. So contact the Swedish Squad of Grand Rapids. They have a very large region, not just Grand Rapids. They can take care of your house, your business, high rise, state capital, whatever it might be. They can take care of it. So you can reach them as well on our support page. You have 15% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate from the Squeegee Squad as a listener to the show. And so, who cleaned the glass best? For Michigan State, the score is 4-6. You easily won with our new format. Even without the new format, you'd have won. You had Kohler and Cooper, I believe. I forgot to write them
Yeah.
down. They
Yep.
each had 7 rebounds. So, either way, you would have. You had both the tie rebounders for the Michigan State with 14. I had Zapala and Cooper, or sorry, Carr for 5. I'm a little surprised too. Most games, Zapala does not have a lot of rebounds, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Sometimes you'll see him just get just a couple offensive boards. I don't know if it's just Cole just kind of snatching from him. They tend to play together, and maybe
Well,
Zapala's kind of clearing out the big guy, and Cole's just the guy cleaning
that's
things up. I'm not sure.
that's some of it that Zapala's job could be to occupy the other five. And that's frequently something that you see happen is that, somebody else, power forward, can be the one who actually ends up rolling up the stats. But yeah, this was actually, and it wasn't that Zapala was bad. I thought he actually did some good things
No,
at
it's
times
fine. Yeah.
defensively, but it wasn't. It goes to show you the effect of the depth on this team. So Zapala has 2 points and 2 rebounds in this game, no blocks.
Yeah.
Not in 16 minutes. Not a very impressive showing statistically, especially coming off, the 15-point game he had in Columbus.
Yeah.
But what happens? Well, you have Jackson Kohler chip in with 6 points and 7 rebounds. You have Carson Cooper with 6 points and 7 rebounds. And if we want to talk about bigs and include him in that category, Xavier Booker, 6 points and 1 rebound. So it's always somebody is stepping up. Now, I'm
Yeah.
very glad to be back in the winner's circle on this one for the first time since we changed
Been a while.
formats.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, it gives me a little more faith in the integrity of the process. How about that? but but yeah, it was one of those. It was weird too because Jackson got off to a huge his more or less typical rebounding start. I think he might have had. I don't recall, but I think he might have had like 6 rebounds at the half. He had most of those in the first half, and then
He had all of them in the first half.
he had all of them. Okay, so he had 7.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a weird deal for him to go reboundless in the second half. I thought for sure he was tracking for another double-digit night, but 7's not bad. And I think I said when I made the pick that it just felt to me like this was a game that Michigan State would feel like going big was the right thing, and that there were going to be opportunities for Coop, and there were. And I thought he played very, very well.
I was
So
really impressed with him too. I mean, this is not related to rebounding, but Cooper, well, I mean, for one thing, he had 7 rebounds in 12 minutes of play.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
impressive. But where he got the ball, I think it was like around the free throw line, and got it right away, went right past Osobor and forced a foul. He ended up not finishing on
yeah.
the rim, but I was really impressed with that offensive move. I mean, and then of course him at the line. I can't get over how well everyone shoots free throws in this team.
There was also a play he made going for an offensive rebound where the shot went up, he was at the free throw line and he just attacked it. Just absolutely. Maybe he was on defense even. It might have been a defensive rebound, but he just attacked it and went over Osobor to get it, which is that guy's a good rebounder, very good rebounder. So Jim Comparoni made a comment I saw earlier in the week. So obviously it was post OSU, where he said that he had been at practice and he said that Carson Cooper I forget exactly how he put it, but basically that he was showing, a little eye of the tiger, so to speak. And I thought you saw some of that. I thought he was very aggressive and very confident in everything he did. The other thing that was nice, which speaks to both of those elements, is I thought he was very decisive when he got the ball in offensive sets, where they
Yes.
use the big to run a lot of handoff screens to
Mm-hmm.
their guards. And that's an area where sometimes, Carson's not, it's not always a negative, but he has issues there at times. And there was none of that tonight. Now, maybe some of that is, Washington wasn't as aggressive as some other teams are, what have you. Didn't make him feel as if he was under pressure. But I just thought he was really aggressive and really confident and really decisive in everything he did. And it produced a very good game for him.
Yeah.
The Twitter people aren't going to be happy with that one.
No.
Because they wanted to run Carson Cooper out of town about 20 times so far this season.
Well, there's got to be someone who's your whipping boy, and this team is increasingly hard to find someone, right?
Does there?
Well,
I know you're saying that kind of rhetorically, but that would be my response. Does there really?
For the Twitter people, there's always got to be someone you go after,
Yeah,
right?
Well,
that bothers you all the time, right?
There always is. Whether there has to be or should be is another question, I guess.
The beauty of this show is we bring the nuance. That's what I've always appreciated.
Well, I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, I'm not saying Carson Cooper's been all Big Ten. I'm not even saying he's been Michigan State's best big man. I would say on balance, well, clearly it's Jackson Kohler, and then Zapala's probably number two, and Carson would be
Sure.
third among those three guys. I'll buy that. But Carson Cooper's made a lot of positive contributions to this team. He
Oh
tends
yeah.
to do it. He tends to do it frequently in ways that don't show up on the stat sheet. And I know there's a lot of dopes out there that think that's a cop out. Trust me, it's not, you morons.
And I
He's
would
legitimately contributing to this team winning with things he does at both ends.
and I would say the other thing too is, we're talking about Michigan State's free field goal percentage of 62% or whatever it is today.
Yep.
And it is not because the bigs are getting layups. There are a lot of layups from the guards, but I would say, almost every time you see that, you have a great seal from Zapala or
Sure.
Kohler or
Sure.
Cooper. Those guys make it a lot easier for those guys to get in the lane and score. And so,
100%.
and you just
And
don't, you're not looking for it. You don't see it. Just like, oh, another layup from Fears. But you didn't see the guy who just got wiped out of the lane to make it easy
but
for him to get right to the basket.
exactly. But what you're talking about, just for the record, is the way in which these position groups interact with each other.
Right.
So the bigs have been much better finishing plays this year overall, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, I would submit, I said this the other day. Last time I checked, I don't think Carson Cooper's gotten a hand transplant, right? But he's converting at a much higher. Why is that? Well, I would submit that I give Carson credit too. I'll buy the idea that, well, he's more locked in, he's put some work in, he's done some things to improve his hands. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But the bigger reason, in my opinion, is he's playing with guards, and particularly one point guard in Jeremy Fears, who makes him better because he makes everybody better. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But then, as you say, the bigs are also playing a role in how effective the guards have been in getting to and finishing at the rim because they're sealing guys off. That means they're not dealing with the kind of contest at the rim that they might otherwise if that wasn't happening. They're setting great picks in pick and roll play up at at the top of the key. The interrelation can't be overlooked, and both groups are doing things to make the others better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Carson's part of that. Anyway.
Yep. No, I totally agree. That brings us to five keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. If you've been listening to the show, Nudge Printing is our original sponsor because they're so awesome. Gabe and Brittany are Spartan alums. They have business based in Portland, Michigan. They have high quality products, all kinds of Spartan apparel. They've got they got stickers you can buy for your wall, for your computer, for your cornhole. They have they're officially licensed by Michigan State, so they can actually have the vintage logos. They can have the current modern day logos, I guess you'd call it, and super high quality apparel. It's not cheap t-shirts. They're not cheap sweatshirts. They're really, really good, super soft, very breathable. I've got hoodies. I've got t-shirts. I've got quarter zips. My daughter's got a jacket. They have really cool hats now. I have about 20 hats at home, so I can't justify buying another hat, but they're really cool. So I would encourage you to go to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com and just check out their huge selection. I know it's past Christmas, but this is good. We're gonna have a great run, I think, this year. So go get your Spartan gear right now, whether it's just for around the house, going out, or whatever it is. Maybe you can work with those clothes on, whatever. It's great stuff. Holds up to the wash. It's all screen printed, which is nicer, high quality. They can do everything. Check it out. 20% off as a listener to the show if you type in Final Four just as one word at checkout. So head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. They support the five keys of the game, and the first key of the game was transition. And I don't know, Rod, is a 28-2 edge in the fast break? Is that pretty good? Is that enough to say that Michigan State won that part of the game?
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of what I figured we'd see. That game to me, I haven't gotten a chance to see Danny Sprinkle's post game, but I'm interested to see what he has to say about it. But to me, that looked like a team that has never played Michigan State. Plain and simple. They had no chance. Michigan State did exactly what they're supposed to do on the defensive glass, So they had a lot of clean rebounds.
Hmm.
And then just that, and then just in general, the way that they pushed tempo and really tried to finish at the rim and keep the pressure on. Especially in the first half. I thought they were even a little better in the
Yeah.
first half, but it was impressive, and it was kind of what I figured that they would get back on track after whatever. I think they had 9 fast break points against Ohio State. This was more in line with what, and then some, with what
Yeah.
we've seen, but I kind of expected that. Now, as a sneak preview, some foreshadowing, spoiler, on Sunday in Evanston, I do not expect it to come this easily. And I will be shocked if it does. But that tells you something. And look, I think that's going to be something that's going to shock. We've seen MSU has seen Oregon and UCLA in recent, and USC actually in
Right.
recent years,
Yeah.
either in the tournament or somewhere or in a feast week tournament. But I still think those programs, it might not be as drastic as what you saw tonight, but I still think it's going to take a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, you have to play once a year, like
Right.
the format now. Yeah.
It's going to take a couple of years for those programs to really, adjust to what it means to play a team that runs the way Michigan State does.
What's interesting about today too is Michigan State had 10 steals, which is good. Uh, but I mean, there a number of those steals were deep in the lane, like under the basket, and yet they still were able
Yeah.
to score in
Yeah.
transition and fast break
Well,
off those steals. Like I think Jeremy had one where he ripped it from someone and just ran down by himself and started a fast break.
I think some of that too was it was noticeable to me that I just I was going to say, and I will say, conditioning was an issue. There were times when Washington looked gas to me, and and some of that may be they're just not in great condition as a team because they're not used to playing this fast. But I also think this was a game where you could say Michigan State's depth impacted the game
Yeah.
as well, especially when you're adding all that. Just think about it. You got to fly three
Yeah.
time
Three time
zones.
zones. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you got to go into a gym where it's full and people are losing their minds. And then you got to play against that. And then you got to not only play against that, but you got to play against that where they're rolling guys in constantly. So you're never going up against anybody who's as tired as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has an impact. But regardless, a huge plus for Michigan State, the transition game.
So the second key to the game was turnovers. This one Michigan State won. I guess you could say is 15-12. When you look at the points off turnovers, it was 17-13 edge actually for Washington over Michigan State. So not a huge edge for Michigan State. I think we were concerned Michigan State had to fix this problem, and they sort of did. Although you mentioned that they had a lot more turnovers in the second half. Well, they
Uh,
just got a little looser, which is not surprising, being up 30 some points, to try and
Yeah.
maintain your focus. And I feel like that was largely what it was. But although Washington, I felt like Washington had more than that as far as turnovers, at least to me. When they only 15, it felt like more because I guess because they've missed so many shots that the few times you're like, boy, they can't make a shot and they're like turning the ball over.
Yeah. To me, the biggest thing was Michigan State playing a clean game. And
Yeah,
I
right.
think I don't have a problem with 12 turnovers in a game that was played like that. That was okay. Wasn't brilliant, but it was clearly a step in the right direction after, I think it was a couple of 17 or 16 and 17 turnover games in
Yeah,
a row. It was important to get back on track, and I think tonight they did that.
yeah, I agree. Third key to the game was the boards. This is one, we mentioned before, Washington, not a good rebounding team. Michigan State, of course, has been kind of elite, both offensively and defensively. Defensively, they were fantastic. They held Washington to only 24% offensive rebounding rate.
Yeah.
Michigan State had 9 offensive rebounds and 29 misses for a 31% rate, which is okay. I mean, certainly
Yeah.
a lot lower than what they've been getting. And there were many opportunities they had, and they just kind of fumbled a couple out of bounds, and
Yep.
it didn't end up mattering. And they still won by 34 points. But anyway, I think that it was certainly the performance we expected, and it was good enough to easily win.
The defensive rebounding was great, and as we said, those were clean rebounds pretty consistently. So that was good to see. The offensive rebounding was kind of I would say, barely passable. They had some
Yeah.
moments where I thought they did some good things, but you're right. Some of it could have looked a lot better had they been able to secure some balls. They did everything right. I mean, I could think about plays in that game where it was all there except for the finish, so to speak.
Yeah. Right.
You
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
but not a disaster, just not an inspiring offensive rebounding night.
Fourth key to the game was the free throw line. This is one we expected. Washington has difficulty fouling, but they're also really good at getting the line. And they did as advertised. They got to the line. They had 23 free throw attempts. They definitely forced issues, certainly more in the second half than the first half.
Yeah.
Michigan State only got there 18 times. Largely, I felt like in the first half of the first half, they were just kind of pretty much not, I don't want to say passive, but they were taking a lot of jump shots, 3 pointers, or they're getting clean layups. It's kind of like one or the other. There was really not any resistance there. But Michigan State, again, 17 for 18 from the line, 94%. I don't know. I can't say enough about how well I mean, just there's nobody you could put on the line outside of Zapala, and even, that you feel comfortable with just about anyone out there.
Yep. Yeah. It's great shooting, little substandard in terms of the attempts, but not a disaster. It slowed. They had 12 free throw attempts in the first half, so they were on track at halftime.
Yeah.
And then in the second half, the game got a little looser for both teams. Washington ended up getting to the foul line a lot in the second half, as you mentioned. Michigan State, not nearly as much, but you know, still, even with 5 fewer attempts, they were +2 in makes
Yeah.
in this game. So, yeah, it didn't, as you say, it didn't really end up mattering that much, but it was good to see Michigan State just continue to take advantage.
And the fifth and final key to the game, as we kind of already talked about, was great Osobor. The $2 million man certainly didn't look like
Yeah,
a good value for watching this game. That's just I think this is a bad matchup for him for with Michigan State
it
with the
is.
guards who move, because it's not like I think when he's playing against stiff, big men, he might be able to get a little more done and be able to just sort of use his ability to move. But against Michigan State's bigs, they all move well, and so it's not like you can get an easy advantage. And he was not, and because he's not really tall, he can't take advantage of people that way either. So it's a
Yeah.
tough matchup for him, and he looked kind of okay for a little bit in the beginning of the second half, and then they just kind of put an end to that.
He'll have better nights than this one for sure, but um, yeah, Michigan State, I think, if you look at what he's done, even in the other Big Ten games, nobody's done this to him. Illinois didn't do it to him. Um, Oregon didn't do it, or the LA schools didn't do it to him. So I think that I think Michigan State did their best job to date this season of just taking away another team's best player.
Yeah. It's gonna be very interesting watching Michigan State because again, they've had 4 Big Ten games, not the greatest competition of a Big Ten, we don't think. And how good is this defense? I don't think we really know, and we were talking about it. We're not going to know till February, really, for about anybody in the Big Ten exactly who they are and who are the contenders and the pretenders. I mean, we think Michigan State is, but we got to see it for a few more games. At least that's my feeling. Defensively, they look really great. I mean, they're shutting down bad teams, and so the question is, can they shut down some good teams? They're going to get tested in the next few games here,
Well,
and we'll have a better idea of where they are.
but I think we've seen them. They played good teams in the non-conference. Kansas didn't have a great offensive day against Michigan State.
That's
You
true.
know, they've already shown that. I'm
Now that was a
convinced
while ago
now.
too, and I'm wondering how they
It
are now
is.
versus then. Yeah.
I think if anything, they're better.
Well, I do too. Yeah.
Um, I think that I don't. I think that the defense is, like I said earlier, I think the defense is good enough that it gives you a high floor with this team. Um, I think where the rubber's likely to hit the road, and that doesn't mean they're going to do this kind of thing to Illinois,
Yeah,
but
right.
for example, but they're going to make like I just it's always possible for a team to just pull a rabbit out of the hat and just make tough shots for 40 minutes, blah blah blah, and have a good day, even if you're playing well defensively. But I struggle to imagine this team not at least playing reasonably well defensively. Like in
Hmm.
any game, I don't think it's in the DNA of this group. I think that their personnel, we talked about the effect of the and that's the thing. It's all of a sudden, you go from, well, the five's this big weak spot. And by the way, it wasn't just that they weren't getting scoring from it. It's those guys when they were younger struggled to stop other good bigs from scoring. That's why doing the job they did on Osobor tonight is so it should be so invigorating, because there are plenty of other good five men to come in this league. And if Michigan State could do that, that's something that the last couple of years they haven't had that card to play.
Yeah.
They can say, okay, we can make life tough on your five man. If you want to get him a bunch of shots, yeah, he may put up some points, but he's going to struggle in terms of his efficiency. And this group, I think, is capable of doing that. And then we know how good the guards are. So to me, where the rubber's going to hit the road as we get into facing better competition. And so, for example, as soon as Sunday afternoon, rather, against Northwestern in Evanston, to me, that game is likely going to come down to how well Michigan State executes offensively,
I agree.
because I think their defense will limit Northwestern to some degree. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't happen, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the rubber's going to hit the road. And can they be a contender wire to wire in this thing? Well, the answer to that, I think, is going to come down in large part to how good is the offense. Does it remain? Do we continue to see the offensive rebounding, the transition play, the relative lack of turnovers, the free throw line? Do we could the 2 point shooting, which was we didn't mention really today, didn't call it out at least, was great again. They were what, plus 60%
Yep.
from two.
62 and a
It's
half.
outstanding, outstanding. All of those things, and then of course we all wait around to see, well, on a given day, can they have a big performance from three? And if that comes into the picture, there's nothing they're missing at that point. There would be nothing missing from this team. So I think that's, to me, I'm pretty confident with what I've seen defensively from this team. It's the other end where you're like, okay, let's wait and see when they're playing in Illinois in
Right.
10
Exactly.
days. Illinois can defend too. Illinois is really good at both ends. So can they execute enough against that team? That's going to tell us something.
Yeah.
Yeah, even Sunday against Northwestern. Northwestern's a pretty good defensive team. That'll tell us something.
Yeah. Absolutely. And on the road's always tough. Even
Absolutely. Yeah.
Evanston, which has become tougher, although I don't exactly
Yep.
know if the students are back yet in Evanston. I assume they will be, but I'm not quite sure and how much that'll matter. But anyway, it's a quick turnaround. It's about 3 games in 7 days here coming up pretty soon. So Michigan State's going to have to not a whole lot of rust and prep time in between. So we'll see them back in the court in Evanston on Sunday, and then at home for 2 games against Penn State on Wednesday, and then back another Illinois team, the Fighting Illini, on Sunday afternoon before they hit the road again. So a lot of coverage coming up, a lot of interest in what Michigan State's going to be, how they're going to play. So I'd encourage you again to go to our support page at the Final Four on the schedule.com/support. There you can support the show through one-time or recurring gifts through Patreon or Substack or Venmo or PayPal. You can also find all of our sponsors 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get an estimate through Brothers Adjust Your Gutters, 15% off if you mention Final Four for the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. And if you type in Final Four, you get 20% off at Nudge Printing. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.